So you've heard me say that VR can be used as a research method to answer fundamental questions. So to get a better understanding of what I mean with fundamental, we should have a look at this distinction between fundamental and applied research. I think this is a very basic and core distinction. If you look at the types of research that people do in universities, for instance, or in research institutes, a fundamental research, you could say, is really curiosity driven. You have a certain question and you want to know the answer to this question, to this theoretical question, just because you're interested in it. There's no direct societal reason for which you're interested in this question, typically. It's just you want to know the answer. You study the literature and you find out that nobody has answered this question yet. And you simply want to find out. So you're really curious, what would be the answer to this fundamental question that I have? So you could say this is really la science pour la science. You're really doing science for the sake of science. You just want to find out something. In other words, you would be interested in advancing the frontiers of knowledge. You find out we have a lot of knowledge about many different things, but this one specific question hasn't been answered yet, and you want to know the answer. You just want to know the answer. So you're going to find out. And so this really also relates to theory building. We have certain theories about all sorts of things, all sorts of aspects of life. Some theories are very strong. We have already nice answers to many questions, but some questions haven't been answered yet. So perhaps you will extend an existing theory, adding some additional, gathering some more knowledge that to a question that hasn't been answered yet. And this really differs in that sense from applied research. So in the case of applied research, there's typically often a direct commercial or societal benefit. For instance, there's a certain societal problem that asks for a response, that asks for a solution, and researchers may contribute to finding this answer to this question, to solving a certain problem, to tackling a certain societal problem, for instance. And this is often done in collaboration with non-academic partners. So researchers then collaborate with, for instance, schools or companies in society. So for instance, I also sometimes work with secondary schools. They have a certain question. For instance, a question they could have is, can we make our lessons of Dutch a bit more interesting to pupils in secondary school? And they ask partners in university like me, could you collaborate on this? Can we maybe use VR to develop a curriculum that's a bit more fun, a bit more interesting for secondary school pupils? And then we sort of jointly find out what could be a nice lesson series for those pupils. So this is very applied, right? So there's a direct societal relevance of the research that you're doing. Yeah, and it's often something you do in practice, right? You're not by yourself in your office finding out things, studying something theoretically, but it's really practical often. So you really, leave your office, you leave your experimental research lab and go into the world and collaborate with non-academic partners, and really what you're investigating then has direct societal consequences. Of course, fundamental research also often has nice practical applications or societal relevance, but this typically comes a bit later. So you find out something that you find theoretically interesting, to which you would like to know the answer, and then later on it turns out, as it often goes, that there has also been some societal relevance of your new research finding. So for instance, I've been studying the hand gestures a lot that people are making when they're speaking from a really theoretical perspective. And then, of course, at some point there was this pandemic and everybody started wearing mouth masks. So then all of a sudden it was very useful that we know certain things about how people communicate with their hands. So if their speech is not so reliable anymore because they're wearing mouth masks, or because there are large screens between themselves and the people they are communicating with in a shop, for instance, then it was sort of nice that we knew things about those hand gestures, how people then start relying more on hand gestures than on speech, perhaps. But this practical relevance wasn't the focus of the research itself. It was just curiosity driven. It was very fundamental. We just wanted to find out what kind of gestures do people make when they're speaking. Right, so this is a basic distinction that is good to keep in mind, I think. If you're using VR as an application, it's typically more applied research. If you're using VR as a research method, it's typically more fundamental. Yeah, so you really have a theoretically driven question that you want to know the answer to.